Maya adjusted the sleeve of her Howard University sweatshirt as she stepped into the gleaming aisles of Greenleaf Market, the upscale grocery store nestled in one of the city's wealthiest neighborhoods. The air smelled of fresh produce and subtle floral scents, a sharp contrast to the uneasy feeling tightening in her chest. For Maya, a black neurosurgeon who had fought tooth and nail to break through every glass ceiling, this wasn't just shopping. It was navigating a minefield disguised as everyday life as she carefully selected heirloom tomatoes. A shadow of suspicion followed her every move. She noticed it, subtle yet unmistakable. A security guard's gaze locking onto her hands, tracking each item she touched as if expecting her to slip something into her bag. Maya's breath caught. She had faced these sideways glances, hushed whispers, and invisible barriers all her life. But today, something felt different, thicker, heavier, like the air itself was pressing down on her. Suddenly, the calm shattered. A sharp voice cut through the ambient hum. "Excuse me, ma'am. You need to come with me." The security guard's tone left no room for questions. Before Maya could respond, a woman stepped forward, a white woman, eyes blazing with rehearsed indignation. "She took medication from my purse while I wasn't looking," Karen accused loudly, her words echoing off the polished marble floor. "I want it back, and I want her arrested." Time slowed as Maya's heart pounded against her ribs. She was stunned, not by the accusation itself, but by the cold certainty that here, in this shining enclave, her truth might not matter. Then, footsteps, uniformed, stern, approached swiftly. The police were here. One officer glanced at Maya's ID, barely meeting her eyes, before muttering under his breath. The unspoken question lingered. How could someone like her belong here? In that moment, Maya understood. This was not about theft. It was about prejudice. And the fight was just beginning. Maya handed over her driver's license with steady hands, her heart pounding beneath a calm exterior. The officer glanced at the card, then flicked his eyes back to her face, but not with recognition. With barely concealed disbelief, he muttered, "Says here you live in Oak Ridge Hills? That's convenient." His tone was sharp, dripping with doubt. "Is there a problem?" Maya's voice was calm, but inside, a storm was gathering. She had lived in Oak Ridge Hills for over 2 years, bought a home, contributed to the community, raised her family there. Yet, the officers acted as if her presence was an anomaly, a mistake that needed correction. Another officer scoffed, stepping closer, his arms crossed. "Nobody around here fits that description, especially not someone like you." The words hit like a slap, unfiltered and raw. Maya's breath steadied, forcing herself not to react. This wasn't about evidence or truth. It was about the color of her skin, a barrier invisible to many, but painfully real in moments like this. She thought of the countless times she had navigated similar rooms, hospital corridors, academic conferences, social gatherings, always needing to prove she belonged, always carrying the weight of suspicion. Here, in this polished grocery store, under the cold eyes of those officers, that burden felt suffocating. The tension thickened as the officers debated. Should they search her on the spot? Take her to the station? The uncertainty was a noose tightening around her dignity. Maya glanced around, catching the wary eyes of other shoppers, some avoiding her gaze, others casting quick looks of sympathy or fear. No one stepped forward. In that sea of silence, she felt painfully alone. Yet, amidst the crushing weight of prejudice, Maya's resolve hardened. She had fought too hard to be reduced to a stereotype. She straightened her shoulders, meeting the officer's gazes with quiet strength. "Am I being detained?" she asked, voice steady. The reply was a non-committal shrug, a refusal to grant her even that simple clarity. Minutes stretched like hours. Every second was a test, not just of her patience, but of the fragile balance between justice and bias. Maya's mind raced, thinking of her husband, Marcus, and the support she would need. But more than that, she thought of every black professional who had faced this invisible wall, every subtle, and not so subtle act of discrimination that chipped away at their right to simply exist without suspicion. The officer's behavior was a textbook case of racial profiling, and Maya knew it. Yet, confronting it openly here could escalate the situation dangerously. She breathed deeply, reminding herself that this fight was bigger than a single moment. It was about exposing the cracks in a system built on assumptions, about demanding recognition not just for herself, but for all those who walked this tightrope daily. The store manager approached cautiously, hands raised in a peace offering. "There's been a misunderstanding," he said quietly. "Can we please handle this privately?" But Maya shook her head firmly. "No," she said, voice resolute. "What happened here is public. The humiliation I've endured cannot be swept away behind closed doors." Her words hung in the air, a challenge and a declaration. For the first time, the officers seemed unsettled, their postures less sure, their voices less certain. The scales of authority, long tipped against her, wavered. In that charged moment, Maya wasn't just a shopper accused. She was a symbol of resistance, a beacon for truth demanding to be heard, and the battle was just beginning. As the tension thickened around Maya, a sudden ripple of movement cut through the crowd. The distant rumble of a military convoy grew louder, an unmistakable sign of authority on its way. Moments later, Marcus arrived, tall, composed, his military uniform crisp and commanding. A colonel, known for his unyielding discipline and sharp mind. Marcus wasted no time. He strode into the scene with purpose, eyes scanning the officers who held his wife in an invisible cage of suspicion. "What's going on here?" His voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of decades of leadership. Maya's lips parted slightly in relief. She had been standing alone on a battlefield she never asked to fight. Now, with Marcus here, the scales might finally tip. One of the officers straightened, puffing up, as if ready to challenge this sudden intrusion of military power. But Marcus's presence wasn't a threat. It was a mirror, reflecting their prejudice back at them with unflinching clarity. "I'm Marcus Thompson," he announced, his gaze locked on the lead officer. "This is my wife. I expect this situation to be resolved openly and transparently. No quiet deals, no backroom agreements. The public deserves the truth." The crowd murmured, some eyes wide with surprise at the boldness of the colonel's demand. Karen, the woman who had accused Maya, shifted uneasily, her confident facade cracking. Marcus's words echoed like a challenge. "She was publicly humiliated. I want this handled in a way that respects her dignity. Any resolution must be just as public as the accusation." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. The power dynamic had shifted. No longer were they merely gatekeepers of suspicion. Now they were under scrutiny. Suddenly, Marcus raised a hand, silencing the whispers. "I'm well versed in Tennessee Code annotated 47-1-103, he said steadily. "Probable cause is required before detaining someone. Questioning someone's residence based on race, That violates every principle this department should stand for. A ripple of tension swept the gathering. The officer's aggressive posture softened, replaced by something more cautious. Maya felt a swell of hope, but beneath it lurked a deep unease. Would Marcus's presence be enough? Could one man's authority dismantle years of ingrained bias? As the store manager approached, hands raised in a gesture of peace, Marcus cut him off with a raised palm. "No, Mr. Stevens," he said firmly. "There will be nothing private about this. The world needs to see how we handle this." Karen attempted to step back, perhaps to escape the spotlight, but Marcus's gaze pinned her in place. Just then, Marcus's phone buzzed. A military communication device, cold and official. "This is Lieutenant Williams, reporting to Colonel Thompson. Situation at Greenleaf Market involving Dr. Maya Thompson. Requesting Chief Donovan's presence." The mention of the police chief sent a ripple through the officers. Suddenly, their earlier confidence wavered, replaced by nervous glances and subdued voices. Marcus stood tall, a silent storm of authority and protection. The scene that had once been a quiet, tense confrontation now bristled with the energy of a turning tide. In that moment, Maya realized something profound. The fight was no longer hers alone. It had become a battle for justice, for truth, for dignity. One that would be witnessed, fought, and remembered, and Marcus was leading the charge. The tension in Greenleaf Market was palpable, thick enough to choke the air itself. Officers hovered like vultures, their eyes darting nervously as the security footage was pulled up on a sleek tablet. The crowd leaned in, breath held, waiting for the truth to unfold. The video played. There was Maya, calm, composed, moving deliberately between the aisles, never once reaching toward Karen's cart or purse. Not a single frame showed her taking anything. The footage was unambiguous, a silent witness to her innocence. Yet, despite the clear evidence, one officer, Hansen, lowered his voice as he muttered to a small group of bystanders. "You folks shouldn't be recording. Best to delete those videos. You don't want to get involved." His words were barely audible, but a young woman nearby caught them, her eyes wide with shock. The attempt to intimidate those holding digital proof was blatant and illegal. Unbeknownst to Hansen, Lieutenant Williams, a disciplined and principled officer who had accompanied Marcus, was quietly filming the entire interaction. His phone's camera caught every word, every gesture, preserving the attempt at evidence tampering. The arrival of Chief Donovan was like a sudden thunderclap in the storm. His presence shifted the atmosphere instantly. The officer's confident postures wavered as he approached, eyes sharp and unyielding. "Chief Donovan," Marcus began, voice steady, "the footage clearly exonerates my wife, yet some of your officers have been encouraging witnesses to destroy evidence. How do you respond to that?" Donovan's gaze hardened. "If that's true, it's unacceptable. We operate under the law, not intimidation." His voice carried the weight of command, but also the flicker of unease. The cracks in his department were now on full display. Meanwhile, Karen Whitfield, the accuser, stood frozen, her earlier bravado replaced by growing uncertainty. Whispers circled. Had she overplayed her hand? But the officers who had first approached Maya weren't ready to concede. Simmons, the senior officer, stepped forward, his tone defensive. "We acted on a complaint. It's our duty." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "A duty that cannot override the rights of innocent people. You cannot detain someone without probable cause, and certainly not based on race." The crowd murmured, tension rippling like a live wire. Maya felt the weight of every accusation, every glance, every whispered doubt hanging over her. Yet, she held her ground. Suddenly, a ripple of movement. The young woman who had recorded Hansen's words stepped forward, phone in hand. "I have the video," she said, voice trembling but clear. "He told us to delete the footage." Lieutenant Williams raised his phone, displaying his own recording. "This is an official record of misconduct. His words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Donovan's expression darkened. He signaled for backup officers to secure the area, ensuring no further interference with witnesses or evidence. The battle lines had been drawn. Behind the scenes, whispers circulated of past complaints against Simmons and Hansen. Multiple allegations of racial profiling and excessive force, mostly dismissed or ignored. Now, with the evidence laid bare, the department faced an undeniable reckoning for Maya. The ordeal was far from over, but the truth, raw, unfiltered, was finally breaking through the walls of prejudice. The crowd watched, breathless, as justice began to take shape in the glare of the unforgiving spotlight. Amid the cacophony of voices, accusations, and flashing cameras, Maya's eyes caught a sudden movement at the edge of the crowd. An elderly man had collapsed onto the cold marble floor, his body convulsing slightly, face pale and twisted in pain. His breath was shallow, labored. Panic rippled through the onlookers, but no one stepped forward. Maya's heart clenched. Despite the whirlwind of injustice swirling around her, her training and compassion surged forward like a lifeline. She moved swiftly, carefully kneeling beside the man. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked softly, her voice a bomb amidst the chaos. He groaned weakly, barely opening his eyes. Maya's fingers found his pulse irregular, faint. She recognized the signs instantly. A stroke, possibly a massive one. "Someone, please call 911, she instructed firmly, scanning the crowd for help. Officers nearby froze, caught between their duties and the unexpected turn of events. For a moment, the tension that had gripped the scene loosened, replaced by a fragile hope. Maya worked methodically, her years of experience in the operating room guiding her hands. She gently positioned the man's head to keep his airway clear, monitored his breathing, and whispered calming words. Every second was precious. Every movement mattered. A paramedic burst through the crowd, eyes wide in recognition. "Dr. Thompson? We didn't expect you here." Maya nodded, her focus unwavering. "I'm here now. Let's stabilize him." The paramedics took over, their professionalism matching Maya's urgency. As they prepared the man for transport, she stood, brushing dust from her knees, her gaze sweeping over the gathered crowd. For a fleeting moment, the chaos of false accusations, suspicion, and prejudice faded into the background. But reality crashed back hard. Despite saving a life in that moment, Maya was still the woman accused, the suspect under scrutiny. The police officers who had questioned her mere minutes before now had no choice but to escort her, not as a detainee, but as a protector of life. Officer Simmons, who had been stern and dismissive, now looked unsettled. He gestured toward the police cruiser. "We'll get you to the hospital. Priority 1. The irony was sharp, biting. The woman they doubted, the woman whose character they questioned, was now the reason an elderly man had a fighting chance. Yet, in their eyes, her worth was still measured by suspicion, not by her skill or humanity. As Maya was led toward the vehicle, she turned briefly to face Officer Hansen. Her voice was steady, void of rancor. "Thank you for the escort." The simple words seemed to unsettle him more than any argument could. In that glance, a silent acknowledgement passed, of error, of humanity, perhaps even of regret. Inside the cruiser, Maya's thoughts raced. The injustice she faced wasn't just personal, it was systemic. It was a shadow cast over every black professional forced to prove their worth beyond their accomplishments. Tears welled, not from defeat, but from the weight of carrying both hope and pain. She whispered a silent vow, to fight not only for herself but for the countless others whose lives, like the elderly man's, depended on moments of courage, understanding, and justice. Outside, the city carried on unaware, the story unfolding here, a quiet battle for dignity amidst a world too often blind to it. The news of Maya's ordeal spread. The community's shock quickly turned into a storm of outrage. Yet beneath the surface, a darker story was unraveling, one that exposed systemic rot festering within the police department. Investigators, spurred by mounting public pressure and Marcus's relentless calls for accountability, began digging into the records of Officers Simmons and Hansen, the very men who had treated Maya with suspicion and disdain. The findings were damning. Simmons, it turned out, had been the subject of 7 separate complaints alleging racial profiling and excessive use of force, each dismissed with little explanation, swept under the rug in bureaucratic silence. Hansen's record was similarly troubling, with 3 serious allegations, none properly investigated. The patterns painted a chilling picture. 2 officers repeatedly accused of targeting minorities, wielding their badges not as shields of justice, but as weapons of intimidation. As these revelations surfaced, the community fractured. Vigils and protests erupted, voices raised in angry calls for reform and justice. Banners proclaimed, "End racial profiling," and "Justice for Maya." As crowds marched through streets, their footsteps echoing demands too long ignored. Yet, for every voice demanding change, there were others defending the officers, often speaking in hushed tones or anonymous online comments. "They're just doing their job," some claimed. "You have to cooperate with police." Beneath these words lurked an undercurrent of denial, subtle biases that refused to acknowledge the truth of systemic racism. Social media became a battleground. Supporters of Maya shared the security footage and eyewitness accounts, while detractors posted skeptical memes and whispered doubts about her cooperation and attitude. The digital war was relentless, personal. Inside the department, the atmosphere grew tense. Officers whispered in corners, wary of the growing scrutiny. Commanders faced tough questions from the press, their carefully constructed narratives beginning to crumble. Maya and Marcus watched it all unfold with heavy hearts. The battle had moved beyond one wrongful accusation. It was a fight against a deeply entrenched culture of prejudice. Late one evening, Marcus sat with Captain Rodriguez, a seasoned officer quietly sympathetic to their cause. "This isn't just about 2 bad apples," Marcus said grimly. "It's a system that's been allowed to rot." Rodriguez nodded, pulling out a thick file. "These complaints? Most never saw daylight. Some officers even joked about handling problem residents. Oak Ridge Hills has a history of targeting black families." The weight of those words settled over Marcus like a storm cloud. Back in the community, tensions simmered dangerously. The sense of injustice, mixed with frustration and fear, threatened to ignite unrest. Leaders called for calm, urging dialogue and reform, but the wounds ran deep. Maya found herself at the center of a narrative far bigger than she imagined. A symbol of resilience, but also a reminder of the painful realities many faced every day as night fell. The question lingered. Would the truth finally lead to change? Or would the shadows of bias and misconduct continue to darken the path toward justice? The answer hung precariously, balanced on the edge of hope and despair. The quiet hum of Marcus's laptop filled the room as he and a small team of trusted military colleagues pored over stacks of documents, videos, and police records. What they uncovered was more than just isolated incidents. It was a web of coordinated misconduct, evidence tampering, and systemic bias that had been quietly festering beneath the surface for years. Hours of body cam footage had been edited, crucial moments mysteriously erased, and witness testimonies coerced or ignored. The pattern was clear. This wasn't an accident or a few bad actors. It was a calculated effort to silence truth and protect a broken status quo. But the revelations didn't stop there. Marcus's team had dug into neighborhood policing statistics, and what they found was staggering. Black residents of Oak Ridge Hills, making up less than 4% of the population, were stopped by police at a rate nearly 7 times higher than their white neighbors. The disparity wasn't just large, it was glaring, impossible to dismiss as coincidence. "This is institutional," Marcus said, voice low but charged with determination. "It's not just about Maya or us. This is about an entire system built on fear, suspicion, and control." The data told a story of repeated stops, unwarranted searches, and escalating confrontations, all disproportionately targeting black families in a community that prided itself on exclusivity and privilege. Marcus shared the findings with community leaders, civil rights advocates, and trusted media contacts. Each revelation sparked outrage and disbelief, but also a growing resolve. One afternoon, as Marcus met with activists and lawyers at a local community center, the room buzzed with urgency. "We have to expose this," a lawyer said. "These numbers prove what many have lived. A system rigged against them." But there was resistance. 2. Some homeowners association members and local officials pushed back fiercely, branding the data as misleading or taken out of context. They argued that police were simply doing their jobs, maintaining safety and order. Marcus listened, knowing these were the very voices that had allowed injustice to thrive unchecked for so long. Undeterred, the military-trained colonel began organizing a strategic response, documenting every piece of evidence with precision, preparing legal briefs, and coordinating with federal agencies known for tackling civil rights violations. Fighting bias isn't just about calling it out, Marcus explained. During a community meeting, it's about building unassailable evidence, holding systems accountable, and refusing to back down. Back home, Maya pored over hospital records, noticing parallels in healthcare disparities. Another battleground where bias quietly dictated who received care and who didn't. Together, their fight was becoming multidimensional, legal, social, and deeply personal. Yet, the weight of these truths was heavy. Every statistic, every edited video, every testimony carried the lives and dignity of countless individuals who had suffered in silence. Marcus glanced at Maya, their shared determination shining through exhaustion. This was no longer a fight just to clear a name. It was a battle for justice, equality, and the soul of their community. And with every piece of evidence gathered, the walls of denial and prejudice began to crumble. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Maya and Marcus took their seats, the weight of months, no years, of injustice resting heavily on their shoulders. This was more than a trial. It was a reckoning. The prosecution wasted no time. Layer by layer, they laid bare the web of lies and misconduct. Edited body cam footage, coerced witnesses, and the stark statistics proving systemic racial profiling. The evidence was overwhelming, painting a chilling portrait of abuse of power. Then came Karen's turn. She entered the witness stand, eyes darting nervously, her earlier confidence nowhere to be seen. Under the relentless questioning of the defense, cracks appeared in her story. Hesitations, contradictions. Finally, after a prolonged silence that seemed to stretch eternity, Karen's facade crumbled. I didn't see Maya take anything, she admitted, voice trembling. I just felt uncomfortable. She didn't look like she belonged. The courtroom gasped. The simple truth, a prejudiced assumption disguised as accusation, had set an innocent woman's life on fire. The judge's gaze hardened. Ms. Whitfield, fabricating a police report is a serious offense. The tension in the room was electric. Maya's eyes glistened with tears, not of triumph, but relief tinged with sorrow. Relief that the truth was finally out. Sorrow for the countless others who might not find justice. Marcus stood quietly beside her, jaw clenched, the soldier's discipline keeping his emotions in check. But even as the trial unfolded, the atmosphere remained charged. The defense attempted to downplay the officer's actions, casting doubt on the systemic nature of the abuses. Yet, each attempt was met with mounting evidence and witness testimonies from community members who had endured similar indignities. Outside the courtroom, protesters gathered, some demanding swift justice, others clinging to denial. The divide was palpable, reflecting a society grappling with uncomfortable truths. Inside, Maya took the stand, her testimony calm but piercing. She spoke not just of her ordeal, but of a lifetime navigating a world that questioned her worth at every turn. Her words resonated deeply, cutting through legal jargon to reveal a raw, human story. As the proceedings drew to a close, the judge issued a stern ruling. Karen Whitfield would face legal consequences for filing a false police report, including community service and mandatory diversity training. More importantly, the court mandated an independent review of the police department's practices, signaling a step toward accountability. For Maya and Marcus, the verdict was bittersweet. Justice had been served, but the scars remained. The fight was far from over as they exited the courtroom, cameras flashing and voices shouting questions. Maya whispered to Marcus, "This is just the beginning." He nodded, eyes steely with resolve. "We'll keep fighting. For us. For everyone." The courtroom doors closed behind them, but the story, one of courage, truth, and relentless pursuit of justice, was just beginning to unfold in the weeks that followed the courtroom verdict. A slow but profound transformation began to ripple through the community. The weight of the past could not be erased overnight, but seeds of change were taking root. Fragile, yet full of promise, Officers Simmons and Hanson, once symbols of unchecked power, faced the consequences they had long evaded. Suspended, retrained, and held publicly accountable, their actions became a stark reminder that justice, though delayed, was not denied at T. Nashville Memorial Hospital, where Maya had dedicated her life to healing others. A new chapter unfolded. Inspired by her ordeal, the hospital launched comprehensive anti-bias training programs, not just lectures, but honest conversations about race, privilege, and empathy. Doctors, nurses, and staff gathered in rooms where vulnerability replaced judgment, and stories replaced assumptions. Maya watched these sessions with a quiet hope, tears welling as she listened to colleagues share their own struggles with prejudice, both as victims and as witnesses. For the first time, the invisible barriers in healthcare began to crack. Outside the hospital walls, the community came alive with dialogue. Local leaders organized town hall meetings, inviting voices from all walks of life to share, listen, and learn. At first, conversations were raw, filled with anger, pain, and mistrust. But slowly, the walls built by years of silence began to crumble. Elderly neighbors recounted their fears. Young parents spoke of hopes for their children. Activists called for systemic overhaul. And amidst it all, Maya and Marcus stood, not as symbols, but as bridges, listening as much as they spoke. One evening, under the soft glow of streetlights, a gathering formed in the neighborhood park. Plates of food were passed, stories exchanged, and laughter, tentative but genuine, broke through the lingering shadows. Marcus raised his glass, voice steady yet warm. This is how change begins, not with anger, but with understanding, not with division, but with connection. Maya nodded, eyes shining. We have a long road ahead, but tonight we walk it together. The tears came then, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming power of hope. Families who had once viewed each other with suspicion now shared meals. Police officers began attending community events, not as enforcers, but as neighbors. Schools incorporated lessons on cultural humility and respect. The hospital's anti-bias program became a model, inspiring others across the region. Yet, Maya knew the journey was far from over. The scars of injustice ran deep, and the fight for true equality required relentless courage. But in those moments, amid shared stories, open hearts, and newfound trust, she glimpsed a future where dignity was not a privilege of color, but a right of all. As she held Marcus's hand, feeling the steady pulse of his unwavering support, Maya whispered, "We're making a difference." He smiled, eyes reflecting the quiet strength they had both discovered through adversity. And somewhere in the gentle rustle of the night, a promise lingered. A promise that through pain, perseverance, and hope, healing was possible. This story, Maya's journey through injustice, resilience, and ultimate hope, is not just hers alone. It belongs to all of us. It is a mirror held up to society, reflecting uncomfortable truths about racism and prejudice, but also the incredible strength we carry when we choose to stand together. Standing up against injustice is never easy. It requires courage, not just in the face of overt hostility, but in the quiet moments when silence feels safer than speaking out. Maya's story teaches us that persistence matters, that dignity can never be taken away unless we allow it. We learn that fighting systemic racism is a collective effort, a marathon rather than a sprint. Change begins with awareness, but it grows through action, holding institutions accountable, educating ourselves and others, and, most importantly, recognizing our shared humanity beyond color, background, or status. This journey also reveals that empathy and understanding are powerful tools. The community's willingness to engage in honest dialogue, the hospital's commitment to anti-bias training, and Marcus's steady leadership show us how bridges are built, one conversation, one connection at a time. But the fight doesn't end here. Every one of us can be an agent of change. Whether it's standing up to subtle prejudice in our daily lives, supporting those unjustly targeted, or simply listening to stories that challenge our perspectives, each act contributes to building a fairer, kinder world. If Maya's story moved you, if it sparked a spark of hope or ignited a flame of determination, then you're part of this journey. We invite you to stay connected, to continue exploring stories that illuminate truth and inspire justice. Subscribe to our channel, where courage meets compassion, and where we champion voices that demand dignity and respect for all. Join a community committed not just to watching change happen, but making it happen. Together, we can turn lessons into actions, words into impact. We can nurture a society where excellence is celebrated, not questioned. Where justice is served equally, not selectively. And where every person, regardless of race or background, is free to live without fear or suspicion. So ask yourself, what will you do when you witness injustice? Will you speak up? Will you stand with those who are vulnerable? Will you choose hope over despair? The answer lies within each of us. And with courage, persistence, and love, we can create a future where stories like Maya's are no longer necessary, because fairness and respect will be the norm, not the exception. Thank you for being part of this important conversation. Your voice matters. Your actions matter. Hit that subscribe button, share these stories, and let's walk this path together toward justice, equality, and a brighter tomorrow. Remember, change starts with you.